Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. The world will note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, a military base, on August 7, 1945. The day after Hiroshima was destroyed, Dr. Yoshio Nishina, a leading Japanese physicist, and other atomic scientists arrived in Hiroshima to examine the damage. They confirmed that the city had been destroyed by an atomic bomb and reported back to the cabinet in Tokyo. Despite this, the cabinet decided to continue the war, a decision intercepted by American magic code breakers. Meanwhile, President Truman returned from the Potsdam Conference and spoke about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, describing it as a military base. He later declared, "We shall continue to use it until we completely destroy Japan's power to make war." With no sign of Japan surrendering, the decision was made to attack another city. On August 9, 1945, at 3:47 a.m., the B-29 superfortress Boxcar, commanded by Major Charles Sweeney, took off from Tinian Island with the Fat Man plutonium bomb on board. The mission plan was almost identical to that of Hiroshima, with two B-29s, including the Enola Gay, flying an hour ahead as weather scouts. Boxcar was accompanied by two observation aircraft, the Great Artiste and Big Stink. The primary target was Kokura, known for its arsenal and military equipment production, with Nagasaki as the secondary target. Sweeney took off with the bomb already armed but with the electrical safety plugs still engaged. During the pre-flight inspection, the flight engineer told Sweeney that the aircraft had a malfunctioning fuel pump. Replacing the pump would take hours, and worse still, moving the Fat Man to another aircraft might take just as long and was dangerous as well, as the bomb was live. Therefore, Tibbets and Sweeney decided to continue the mission with Boxcar. Observers aboard the weather planes reported both targets, Kokura and Nagasaki, as clear. When Boxcar arrived at the rendezvous point over Yakushima Island, the Great Artiste joined shortly after. However, Big Stink failed to make the rendezvous because it was flying much higher than it should have been and was not flying tight circles over Yakushima as agreed. Although Boxcar was ordered not to circle longer than 15 minutes, it waited for Big Stink for 40 minutes before leaving the rendezvous point. As commander of the aircraft, Sweeney decided to proceed to the primary target, Kokura. The delay at the rendezvous caused clouds and drifting smoke from fires started by a major firebombing raid on nearby Y the previous day to obscure Kokura. Additionally, the Yamata Steel Works intentionally burned sea tar to produce black smoke. The resulting conditions covered 70% of the area over Kokura, obscuring the aiming point. Over the next 50 minutes, 3 bomb runs were made, burning fuel and exposing the aircraft to heavy defenses, but the bombardier could not drop visually. By the third bomb run, Japanese anti-aircraft fire was getting close. With fuel running low due to the failed fuel pump, Boxcar and the Great Artiste headed for their secondary target, Nagasaki. The term Kokura's luck emerged from this mission, highlighting how the city's obscured visibility due to weather and smoke spared it from the atomic bomb. The crew decided that if Nagasaki was obscured on arrival, they would carry the bomb to Okinawa and dispose of it in the ocean if necessary. At about 7:50 a.m. Japanese time, an air raid alert was sounded in Nagasaki, but the all-clear signal was given at 8:30 when only 2 B-29 superfortresses were sighted. At 10:53 a.m., the Japanese assumed the planes were only on reconnaissance, and no further alarm was given. A few minutes later, at 11 a.m. Japanese time, the Great Artiste dropped instruments attached to 3 parachutes. These instruments also contained an unsigned letter to Professor Sagan, a physicist at the University of Tokyo who had studied with 3 of the scientists responsible for the atomic bomb at the University of California, Berkeley. The letter urged him to tell the public about the dangers of these weapons of mass destruction. While searching for his relatives, Yamaguchi died in 2010 of stomach cancer. Only hours before Boxcar took off from Tinian, Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov had informed Tokyo of the Soviet Union's unilateral abrogation of the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact. At 2 minutes past midnight on August 9 Tokyo time, Soviet infantry, armor, and air forces had launched the Manchurian strategic offensive operation. 4 hours later, word reached Tokyo of the Soviet Union's official declaration of war, crushing the last hope of the Japanese government for Soviet mediation. But still, the senior leadership of the Japanese army began preparations to impose martial law on the nation, with the support of Minister of War Anami, to stop anyone attempting to make peace. This was only hours before Boxcar would release the Fat Man bomb. The Big Six formally met on the morning of August 9, 1945, to address the situation. The full cabinet met at 2:30 p.m. and spent most of the day debating surrender. Anami conceded that victory was unlikely but argued in favor of continuing the war. The discussion during this meeting centered on both the Hiroshima bombing and the Soviet invasion of Manchuria. They were interrupted by news of the atomic bombing of Nagasaki during their deliberations. The meeting ended at 5:30 p.m. with no decision having been reached. At the meeting, the Big Six were divided. For accepting the Potsdam Declaration were Prime Minister Suzuki, Foreign Minister Togo, and Admiral Yanai. For continuing the war with conditions were Minister of War Anami, General Umezu, and Admiral Toyoda. They insisted on conditions, including no occupation of Japan and conducting their own war crimes trials. With the Big Six deadlocked, Prime Minister Suzuki went to the palace to seek the intervention of Emperor Hirohito. Hiro Onoda, a Japanese soldier, is renowned for his incredible story of loyalty and survival, having refused to surrender for nearly 30 years after World War II ended. Onoda was an intelligence officer in the Imperial Japanese Army stationed on Lubang Island in the Philippines. When the war ended in August 1945, Onoda and his small group of soldiers were unaware, or refused to believe, it. They initially encountered a leaflet in October 1945 announcing Japan's surrender, but they dismissed it as Allied propaganda. The turning point came only in 1974, when the Japanese government located Onoda's former commanding officer, Major Taniguchi, who traveled to Lubang to formally relieve Onoda of his duties. On March 9, 1974, Taniguchi personally delivered the orders to Onoda, convincing him that the war had indeed ended.